3 more ships hijacked in 24 hours off the coast of Somalia, just days after pirates were killed by US and French forces and just hours after a US congressman had a narrow escape in Mogadishu. The issue of piracy is stepping up on all fronts, but will US military muscle deter the hardcore Somali pirates? Just what will it take to eliminate the threat of piracy in the Horn of Africa? This is Inside Story. Hello there, I'm Kamal Santamaria. The issue of piracy is a pretty familiar one to us here on Inside Story. We've covered it many times, but with very good reason. It just keeps getting worse. The attacks keep getting more brazen, and now, as we've seen with the US crude Maersk Alabama, the responses have become even more daring. In fact, the tables have almost begun to turn in the last week against the pirates, which is why we're looking in depth at the topic again. The pirates themselves have suffered in recent times. At least 5 were killed in 2 separate incidents when the US and French got involved in rescuing hostages. In retaliation, the pirates have vowed to deal firmly with hostages coming from countries that attack them or even threaten to attack them, raising fears the pirates may just become more aggressive and more dangerous. All up, pirate attacks have risen considerably this year, at least a dozen ships seized, and more than 200 crew members currently being held hostage. And remember, each ship can carry the potential of $1 million ransom. Will the issue be resolved anytime soon? Probably not. But has it reached a critical point? For sure it has. Let's get straight into our discussion because there are plenty of issues to cover off, including what looks like an increased US involvement in the fight against piracy on both sea and land. Let's welcome our guests. In Nairobi, Awad Ashare is a prominent member of the Somali Parliament. In Oslo is Stig Hansen, a project director for one of the few research programs on the Aden piracy groups. He's also the author of a book called The Borders of Islam. In London is Will Geddes, a shipping security specialist at International Corporate Protection. But first we go to the phone. On the line from St. Paul, Minnesota in the United States is Dr. Ahmed Samatar. He is a professor and Dean of the Institute for Global Citizenship at Macalester College. Dr. Ahmed, thank you for your time. I want to get your perspective, first of all, especially on this incident with the Maersk Alabama. Rightly or wrongly, is it something of a catalyst to bring forward and really bring into prominence, especially in the United States, this issue of piracy?
Well, I think to a certain extent it is, in the sense that when American nationals are caught up in those kinds of situations, the alert goes quite high here in the United States, both at the level of the government, whether it is military wing or it is a diplomatic wing, and certainly at the level of public consciousness about what's going on. So on that score, the United States becomes much more preoccupied in what's going on in the coastal zones of Somalia.
You talk about the levels of government, and I think we'll just pause just for a second to have a listen to the highest man in the land, the US President Barack Obama. This is what he had to say on the issue of piracy.
I want to be very clear that we are resolved to halt the rise of piracy in that region. And to achieve that goal, we're going to have to continue to work with our partners to prevent future attacks. We have to continue to be prepared to confront them when they arise. And we have to ensure that those who commit acts of piracy are held accountable for their crimes.
It's a good intention, isn't it, Dr. Ahmed? And I guess it's good to hear the President of the United States putting it up there. But in the end, he's probably got a lot more pressing issues to deal with than piracy in a very far-off land.
Oh, yes. There are many other issues that are much more critical to the United States than the piracy on the Somali coast. But I think the leadership of the United States on this issue and galvanizing other countries, both in the region and also around the world, who have interest in the safety of the high seas is going to be quite critical.
I guess this whole incident with the Maersk Alabama was different for many reasons. You had the US crew who fought back, you had the captain who was captured, and then he was rescued by the Navy SEAL snipers. I don't know if this is the right word, but could it almost be like a blueprint for the future? If prevention doesn't work, this is how potentially these attacks could be dealt with when they happen.
Yes, I think in my opinion you are going to see more and more of a tough fist in the face of the pirates, and therefore a greater militarization of the coastal areas of Somalia. But I think in the final analysis, though, the basic for all of this. And the hidden story behind the story of the day is this enormous crisis in the Somali society itself. There is really no central authority on Somalia of any substance, including the so-called new government. The regional authorities in Puntland are incapable or in connivance with what's happening on the coast. And therefore, the act of desperation on Somali people who live on the coastal areas, including those who are criminally minded, is the real issue. And what to do about Somalia in this context becomes the deeper concern that the rest of the world will have to give attention to.
Dr. Ahmed Samata on the line there from Minnesota in the US. Thank you so much for your time and for your thoughts. Let's go to Nairobi now and speak to Awad Ashare, who is a Somali MP. He's in Kenya at the moment. You know, we've brought up this issue of what's happening on land, and as you know, a US congressman went to Mogadishu, I guess to try and start efforts between the US and Somali governments. Is it worth doing that at the moment when the Somali government is still so fragile?
I think, you know, he did a courageous move to know exactly what was in the field. In the current government, there is a weakness in administering in Somalia. I do agree with the professor. But the issue of the crisis of the sea pirates is not coming from the pirates only. It's coming from the lawlessness in the land and the problem of the Somali reconciliation and peace process needs to be worked out, so that the crucial situation that the Western and the Eastern nations are facing in this important passage during this time where we are having a dilemma economically and financially all over the world, it needs to be solved radically, and this must be done by creating and establishing the necessary Somali coastal guards. I don't agree with the professor in one thing. The Puntland and other areas, they need support and training of those, because what we see now, the sea pirates started. One foreign nation started to loot Somali marine resources, and some of them were dumping toxic wastes. Today, one of those fishermen, they caught Italian ship, which is having something dragging something which look like a cylinder, which is like a tanker, and it's now in the port near to Lascoray, and there are the illegal fishing of the Egyptians, 2 ships that are now, Puntland is sending medical team to the area, and they are going to try these people in their courts. This indicates that the Western nations and the international community is not taking the right course of solving the problem of the sea pirates. The sea pirates only can be solved by supporting and empowering the new government in the transitional government, as well as the regional administrations of Somaliland and Puntland areas.
Okay, so let's go to Stig Hansen in Oslo and discuss some of this. Do you agree with that it's the internal issues are the real problem, and that US efforts or international efforts, whatever they might be, aren't actually going to go to the heart of the problem? They could even exacerbate it?
I agree with some of the former speakers, although I want to add something. I would say that the first pirate attack in Somalia was in 1991, so it was probably before the starting of the dumping of the toxic waste and so forth. This is a serious problem, and it adds to the legitimacy of the pirates. And I think the naval forces outside of Somalia, it's an interim measure, and when the attention goes away, the problem will still be there. So you need to build up a Somali state, clearly. But I want to add to the last speaker that I agree very much with him. A Somali state will take time. The front line here is the local authorities, and that's what have been neglected, partly because of lack of trust. So, but more engagement in local authorities like Puntland, and also local authorities closer to the Haradere Hobbio cluster in central Somalia, it's very important, and that's the most efficient remedy in the short term. I want to add a warning, because now the entity of Somaliland, close to Puntland, also experienced serious problems. And my warning goes like this. If Somaliland is not aided through the election problems, and if the clan problems in Somaliland doesn't, we are not helping them solving those problems, we might have a similar problem in that part of Somalia. So this might expand, and now the international community have a chance to go in and stop the decline of Somaliland, like perhaps they should have done with Puntland previously, in a more proper way. I would hereby ask the international community to address this problem simply.
Right, so we're focusing, and quite rightly, I guess, on the real crux of the matter, on the land, the lawlessness in Somalia. However, I would like to look a little bit more about what's happening on the water. Will Geddes waiting patiently for us in London. Let me come to you. The United States now seemingly leading a much bigger effort and going in with, as I said before, Navy SEAL snipers to free the captain of the Maersk Alabama. I mean, this type of thing's not going to happen every time, is it? This is, as we've heard before, it's an interim fix-it, if you like.
I think it is an interim fix-it, but I think it will become standard operating procedures. The Navy SEALs have already been present in the area as part of the combined task force, which were originally put into the region as a counter-terrorism element towards the war in Afghanistan. However, as we're seeing, the pirates are getting more and more bold, and ultimately they're not going to be dissuaded by very little. And as you reported earlier, their threat obviously against any countries that either repel or certainly issue a warning of a countermeasure shows that they're continuing to be very brave. So ultimately, you know, the Navy SEALs are going to remain there, but as are other special forces maritime contingents from other nations in the region. I think we're going to start seeing the fights escalating. Just
briefly before we take a break, Will, do you think this is worthwhile in the end? It's kind of, as we've addressed the real core issues, excuse me, it's almost like these Navy SEALs and all these Navy force out there, they're chasing their tail almost. You're going after the horse is bolted, effectively.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think looking at that in isolation is like putting a Band-Aid on a trauma wound. You know, it's only a very, very sort of immediate fix-it. What we've got to look at is, I'm afraid to say, a more aggressive stance by the international communities against, obviously, the pirates, and whether that be in conjunction with the new government and with the Puntland region, who have shown great demonstrations that they want to assist in the problem, but are you know, underwhelmed or underarmed in being able to address this. You know, 1846, which was the latest UN resolution back in December, said that the pirates could be chased into local waters. The fight, I'm afraid, has to get taken onto land, I'm afraid.
Stick around, folks. When we come back after the break, we're going to look even closer at that international effort to combat piracy, but as we have, query whether any of it can work while the Somali crisis goes on. Back on land. Back in a moment.